Good evening and welcome to the final televised debate in Minnesota's race for the U.S. Senate. Tonight's program is being streamed live by our broadcast partner WCCO Radio at WCCOradio.com. And we also welcome a national C-SPAN audience tonight. We call this a debate, but that's probably too formal a term. There are no time limits, no opening or closing statements, no lots were drawn backstage for anything. Our goal tonight is lively conversation touching on issues and politics. We have three candidates joining us tonight. We invited them because each has received more than 5% support in a statewide poll. Here they are in alphabetical order. Dean Barkley is the Independence Party candidate. He served briefly as senator after the death of Paul Wellstone. Norm Coleman is the incumbent in this race. The Republican senator won the seat against Walter Mondale 6 years ago. And with us as well this evening is Al Franken. He is the Democratic Party's nominee. Thank you, fellas, for being here. Senator Coleman, he's sitting right here. I wonder if you would tell Al Franken what you think has been the most misrepresented part of your platform in the ads that have been run against you.
That's an easy one, Eric, particularly when people are worried about the price of a gallon of gas, and it's dropping, which is a good thing. But all the ads about big oil, voted for tax breaks for big oil. The tax break for big oil were contained in the Energy Act of 2005. 85 senators voted for that. And the reason this senator voted for it was because it contained the first renewable fuel standard, which unleashed the renewable revolution in this state, which we benefited from. It revised the whole process by which we did nuclear plants. It resulted, by the way, in scores of new ethanol plants being built, wind energy tax credits. This was the bill that got renewables started. And by the way, a number of us, including myself, then moved to take the tax credits, the benefits from big oil, and move them to renewables. So when Chuck Schumer has run about $7 million worth of commercials with, tax breaks for big oil, Obama voted for that, Dayton voted for that, almost every upper Midwest senator voted for that.
You did too. Okay, Al Franken, what ads are Norm Coleman running that you think have mischaracterized a stance of yours or your position on something?
Well, for example, I ran an ad that said that Norm voted against, voted to prohibit Medicare from negotiating with the pharmaceuticals on Medicare Part D. Now, this is approximately $300 billion giveaway to insurance companies and to the drug companies, and it has real consequences for folks. I met a nurse in Cambridge, Minnesota, who works in the ICU unit there. And she says that seniors end up in her ICU unit when they hit their donut hole.
Okay, so what ad is the Coleman campaign running that you're not very excited
about?
Okay, well
then, in response, he ran an ad that said that I was lying. And he said that I was against prescription drug program in Medicare. I am for a prescription drug program in Medicare in which Medicare is allowed to negotiate on Medicare Part D. Well, that'll bring down the price of drugs for seniors, and it's a $300 billion giveaway. And his ad said that, one, that I was lying in my ad. I wasn't. And two, that I was against prescription drugs for seniors through Medicare.
This is a great division, in fact, not just on this issue, but a number of them. We talked about the energy bill. Al said he would have voted against that because of one provision in it. On this bill, I ran on a platform of providing prescription drug benefits for seniors. Had I not voted for that, we would still be having this debate today. There are over 500,000 Minnesota seniors who now have prescription drug benefits. Without Medicare D, they would. And let me just say this. The Congressional Budget Office has said, contrary to what Al has said, that there's no difference in terms of a price. But more than that, let me make this point. Al may be for things in theory, but then in practice, when it comes to the floor of the Senate, are you going to vote on a bill that's going to provide renewable energy? He said, I would have voted no because of the big oil tax. Are you going to vote for a bill that's going to provide prescription drug benefits to seniors? I'm for it in theory, but in practice, when you're going to produce it, no. I'm for middle class, but when you get a chance to vote for alternative minimum tax breaks, I'm not for it because it's in a bill I don't like. You got to be for something in this business.
Is there an ad that you don't like?
I mean, I get a badge of honor. Yeah, it's not that they ran, but the Democratic Senate Congressional Committee just put up an ad today. I saw it on TV, claiming that that I was in favor of privatization of Social Security.
You were.
And that's what they
I've
said.
had that same claim.
No, they
And
said
it's not
that.
true,
And
by the way.
I've been railing against Social Security and trying to get it fixed since 1992. I've given how I would fix Social Security from 1992. Now, your friends in the Democratic Senate Committee are saying that I'm in favor of privatization of Social Security.
Actually didn't say that.
They did too. Well, they used a word where they kind of hedged it a little bit, but they're lying. And why are they doing that to me? I mean, I'm glad I'm taking support, and people are, and you're paying attention to me, but get your facts straight.
Mr. Franken.
I didn't put out the ad. As you know, I can't coordinate.
Well, ask
I
them
can't
to take
talk
it down.
to them. I can ask them. But I think what they said, I was the only one in the race that isn't for private accounts, which Norm Coleman is for, which is to put, Norm Coleman voted to put money from Social Security into private accounts, which would have meant investing Social Security in the stock market. I think I fought that in 2005, and I fought it tooth and nail, and I think it would have been a terrible mistake, as we can see right now, to have put private accounts in the stock market. And I think
Since you brought that up, and you did bring it up in a debate recently, and you did not really respond to that. So let me ask you about that, because actually Mr. Franken did bring this up. And in a story that was on Minnesota Public Radio a couple of years ago, you talked about, when this idea was floated, about personalizing Social Security, giving folks the right to grow their money. So in hindsight, the idea doesn't sound so good right now. I mean, should Wall Street manage our long-term retirement funds?
The issue gets back on almost all these the same point, is how do you fix it? How do you fix Social Security? I have supported the idea of folks having some ownership, and whether it could be bonds, it could be Treasury, it could be anything. But the point is that I'm also the co-author of a bill that would put together a commission, not a commission just is going to study it, but like we do with base closing, something that would say, okay, we're going to put the ideas on the table.
Hasn't
okay?
this been studied enough?
But it's not about it's not about studying. What you do with base closings, because politicians won't close any military base, you empower the body to say these are the proposals, and then Congress has to respond. Otherwise, we will debate and debate. And so I'm looking at the solution where they're only talking about what I'm for and what I'm against. The Senate is not a debating society.
Norm, that's what we get elected for, is to make decisions, not to pass it off to someone else. You're saying they don't have the courage, our Senate doesn't have the courage for the fixes. The fixes aren't hard. I mean, they're easy. You raise the tax, that's one possibility. You raise the retirement age, that's the other possibility. You may be means tested after everyone's got everything back, that's another possibility. I mean, the fixes are simple, but no one has the courage to say it. No one has the courage to go up against the AARP because they're all afraid to, because they might lose power. It's not hard, it's having courage.
You know, this is kind of like watching Carlos Gomez of the Minnesota Twins. Kind of fun to watch, but if you don't know the fundamentals, you can't win the game. In the end, it's not about courage, it's about can you fix it. We have seen that it is difficult to fix things in Congress, but there's a path. And the difference I may say between
Congress is now, you're absolutely right, it is difficult because you guys can't fix anything.
The fact is, we can fix it if we can come together. You can't fix it if you're just debating your concept. We're going to raise taxes on Social Security.
It's an option.
It's not, but it's not about simply debating it. So I've come up with a formula, not just me, by the way, Democrats, the head of the Budget Committee, Kent Conrad for North Dakota, Republicans, the head of the Budget Committee, Judd Gregg, saying there's a path, and that's the difference. Rather than debating, we've got to figure out how to fix these things.
Your quick fix for Social Security, is there one?
Well, Social Security right now is solvent until 2041. There are ways in which to address a shortfall if we have a shortfall. And one of the ways, and the way that I would prefer, and this is what Senator Obama has said, is that if the projections aren't right, and if we look like we're running into trouble, but again, remember, this is almost, it's 30-some years away, right? Someone who makes $50,000 pays 100% of their FICA on 100% of their income. Someone who makes $1 million pays 10% of their on their income. They pay FICA on 10% of their income. So what happens is it becomes very regressive. So what we're talking about, and what Senator Obama is talking about, is changing the threshold and raising it at 103, but skip to about $250,000. That's why he says he's not going to raise taxes, and I'm not going to raise taxes on anyone.
No, I'm kind of deep sighing. I mean, Al, what's in the Social Security Trust Fund? You're saying
Treasuries.
Yes. IOUs that they're going to pay back. We're going to start drawing out of that in about 13 or 14 years. Not 3140, not that far away. And what are we going to do? There's nothing there. It's IOUs. We don't have a trust fund. It's been spent. It's not there. And I was at a class today at Cretin-Durham Hall, 150 kids there. I asked them, any of you in this room think you're going to get Social Security? Not one hand went up. Not one hand. It's because we refuse to talk about it. We either want to put it off or have someone study it. We can fix it. It's not that difficult. Let's just be honest and do it.
Well, I'm talking about it, and my fix would be, if we need to, but it is to raise the threshold that FICA is subject to, but skip from, right now it's 103 to 250. So you don't do, middle-class people don't have to pay any extra tax. Then you just barely put it in, so people at the top are beginning to pay a little bit more. That would be my fix. But let me say something about what is in there. Those are treasuries. Those are the safest instruments in the world. If the U.S. Treasury bonds aren't good, we're all in a whole bunch of trouble.
What's the problem?
Let me just say this. Between doing nothing now or raising taxes, I have no doubt, Kathy, that the path that we're going to do this is a path that I talked about, that folks are going to come together and put the burden, okay, we should do it, but Congress isn't, on some folks to say, this commission, lay out the proposals, and then Congress vote them up, vote it down, no way out, and that's the way it's going to be solved.
Let's talk about the stimulus package. Now, the $700 billion financial industry bailout plan has been ground well trod in other debates. You voted for it. You would have voted against it had you been in the Senate, and I think you're a reluctant yes. Is that right?
Reluctant yes.
Okay. Democratic leadership in Congress are talking about a second multi-billion-dollar stimulus package that could be passed post-election. And I'm curious, gentlemen, at this point, does it make sense to pass another stimulus package? And if so, what's in it? Dean Barkley, you first.
It's not, because I just heard something disturbing today. Wall Street, the same banks that we just bailed out, are scheduled to give $70 billion in bonuses to their executives. That's got to stop. I mean, that's ludicrous. That we just gave, what is it, 150 billion we gave to them, or 250? They're going to schedule it. This was in England that was reported, not in this country. $70 billion in bonuses. That's outrageous. And hopefully Paulson's going to have the courage to step in there and say, no, you're not. I mean, that's just absolutely crazy. Another stimulus package? No. What did the last one do for us? I got $300. Some people may have gotten $600. That's not going to work. The only thing that's going to work is when people in this country start believing in their institutions again. They've lost faith in Wall Street. They don't believe them anymore, and they shouldn't. They've lost faith in Congress, a 9% approval rating. They don't believe them anymore, and they lost faith in the presidency. That, if we can restore people's faith in our institutions and start spending money again, that's going to bring us back. Not another $600 stimulus check.
Second stimulus package, what do you think?
Part of the reason I voted against, or I would have voted against the bailout package, is that it didn't really do anything on golden parachutes and bonuses. That's one of the many reasons. Look, people are hurting, and we need to get the economy working again. Now, my mantra is jobs, baby, jobs. And here are the things that I would do to keep the jobs we have and to create new jobs. One, build bridges and roads and schools, the things we've been...
WPA type thing from the 1930s?
Building infrastructure is just, we've always built infrastructure, and it always has a multiplier effect, and it creates good jobs. Secondly, let's address the housing crisis head on. I agree with Barack Obama that we have to help families who, through no fault of their own, are in trouble, stay in their homes. Third, let's stop rewarding companies that are offshoring our jobs overseas, American jobs overseas. They're getting tax breaks. We should stop that. Okay, let's get credit in the hands of small businesses. That's fourth. Fifth, a green economy. Let's make Minnesota the epicenter of a green economy to create hundreds of thousands of jobs. And finally, tax cuts in the hands of the middle class. The middle class is the engine of our economy. We have to stop tilting all these tax cuts and tax giveaways to the special interest.
Thank you, Senator.
I got to make 2 points. One, there actually was a specific provision in the bill about golden parachutes, so Al's simply wrong about that. Absolutely. Specific provision prohibiting them if Treasury has some of the assets, buys some of that. So the specific provision in the bill, just number one, Al, you're simply wrong on that. Secondly, we had a provision in this very bill that provided tax cuts for the middle class. It was called AMT relief. Al Franken, by the way, after the bill we voted for, and Eric, I've never heard a reporter ask Al, why did you wait till after the bill was voted on to say how you would vote? But so that
if you want.
I'd love to find out why you waited till after. This was an issue that people called upon, the issue of our moment, of our time. And the second piece of it, as part of the bill, was to provide credit for small businesses. That's what it's about. Credit was being frozen, so the small business guy was going to lose access to credit for inventory, for payroll. Folks like me who depend on their student loans for their kids would be in a position of having to tell their kids, you can't go back to school in January because there's no loans available. And so that's what it was provided. Look, can I just, let me talk about the jobs piece.
Real quick.
Very quick.
Okay. Could I ask Mr. Franken a question?
Economy grows on confidence. So we got to come back, get the federal budget under control, give the president line item veto, get some discipline in the federal government, then move forward in a bipartisan way to deal with energy and health care, both issues which I am working on. And if we get those passed, you will generate a degree of confidence. So we got to get our house in order. There's a path to do it, but it's not higher taxes, it's not more programs, it's not more spending.
It looks like you'd have to wait to see what's in that second stimulus package.
I'm not at this point. I'm not going to support another $300 billion. If there were tax cuts for small business that would grow jobs, I'd support that. But if it's another spending package, I'm not going to support it.
Now, you wanted to know.
Well, let's talk about the provision against golden parachutes. This is how they're defined. A golden parachute is 3 times the average income that an executive got over the last several years. So if an executive got $10 million a year over the last 3 years, and if he got $30 million in using his stock options, that's an average of $20 million a year, he can get $59.99999 million. Now, oh, right, it's not a golden parachute, but it is. To me, that's a lot of money, $59.9 million. And that's what this bill allows. So let's understand that when you look at what the bill really was, it wasn't working for middle-class Americans.
Barack Obama was for golden parachutes and not for the middle class. Amy Klobuchar was for golden parachutes and not for the middle class. Harry Reid was for golden parachutes and not the middle class. Again, you just can't be against things. You can't be against Medicare prescription drugs for seniors. You can't be against stabilizing an economy and all these other things in there because I didn't like a provision about golden parachutes the way it was defined.
Say, by the way, why did you come out against the bill after the vote was taken?
Well, way before the vote was taken, I laid out the principles under which I would accept such a bill, and it didn't meet them, and I wasn't voting. Then I did it the next day. I mean, the vote was, I can't remember what time it was. I did it immediately after. But here's the point. I'm going to exercise my independent judgment when I'm a senator, and I think Minnesotans expect that. Now, just because 75 senators, look, senators on both sides of the aisle whom I respect voted for it and against it. But I'm going to use my independent judgment, just like Paul Wellstone did when he voted against the war. Now, Norm said that vote was way outside the mainstream. That was his objection to Paul's vote. Except that Paul was right.
Paul Wellstone never would have waited till after the vote to tell you what he was going to do.
Senator.
He would have never, ever waited till after the vote to tell you what he was
I haven't heard from you.
Well, I'm having fun just letting him ride it here for a while. You know, I've heard a lot of things here. I keep on hearing from Al. And I like Al, but all these things we're going to do, all these new spending projects, the new infrastructure, we're going to do that. We're going to do tax cuts for the middle class. That's great. But we're $11 trillion in debt. Who's going to pay for it? My kids, my grandkids, their great-grandkids. When are we going to get a reality of stop pandering about what the federal government can do and start getting real about what we can't do? We're broke. I'm the first one to acknowledge this. I'm glad everyone else is saying that we've got a budget problem now, a spending problem. Norm, I'm glad you're saying we want to balance the budget in 5 years. Where were you for the last 6, though, when we accumulated $5 trillion of debt on your watch? I'm glad you finally got it. I'm glad you're on board.
I agree with
where
you.
Were you?
I agree with you about pandering, but let's talk about real and talk about watch. Under your watch, when you were Jesse's right-hand guy, state of Minnesota came in with a huge budget surplus, and you left with a $4.5 billion debt. That was really your watch. And I can tell you, under my watch, up until the housing crisis collapsed, we actually grew about 8 million jobs. We lessened the budget deficit, and that was until the housing collapse, which, by the way, was caused
lessened the budget deficit. It was about 6 when you got in, and it's almost 11 now. How was it ever lessened?
The budget deficit was lessened 8 million jobs. Additional revenues. The tax cuts that cut taxes on capital gains brought money back into the economy. And if you want to grow jobs,
I've got to respond because he did this in the last debate about the Ventura, that we did this. Listen, we gave the legislature a budget that would have prevented the catastrophe that we had. Roger Moe and Tim Pawlenty cut their own deal and gave us a bad budget. We vetoed it. We said this was bad for the state. It was going to bring economic ruin to the state. We did everything we could. Unfortunately, we only had one person in the legislature, Bob Lassard, to back up our veto. We vetoed it, and this was the Tim Pawlenty, Roger Moe mess that got into it. We had nothing to do with it.
Al Franken.
Let's talk about deficits, and let's talk about balanced budgets. When George Bush was given the presidency, handed the presidency, he inherited a record surplus, Now he's handing off to the next president a record deficit. He has, and a meltdown in our financial system, and probably a large recession. Now, he's created an enormous hole for us, and we got to get out of the hole. Now, I am against deficit spending. I'm for balanced budgets, but we're in a hole now that we've got to get out of in a way that creates prosperity. And that's what Bill Clinton did. Bill Clinton, during his presidency, there were 23 million jobs. There are certain things that you need to do to create prosperity, and those were the things that I was talking about. And what you don't want to do is cut spending and not have tax cuts and drive the economy down and hurt the middle class. You want to help the middle class. You want to create prosperity like Bill Clinton did.
Weren't you talking about balancing the budget in 5 years, Norm Coleman? Did I see that on your website?
Yes.
How in the world could you possibly do that?
I think you start by spending caps. You start by that. You also then put some force measures in there if Congress doesn't meet those. Again, I think, Dean, in all respect, and you were there 8 days, if you want to do it, sometimes you got to force the hand of the members of Congress. Okay, so you got to do that. You're going to say, here's what we're going to do. You don't do it, by the way. I'm going to tell you you don't do it by raising taxes. You don't grow jobs. You are raising taxes. If you let the tax cuts of 03 expire, you're going to raise taxes.
Okay.
You're going to raise capital gains tax. Does that grow jobs? You're going to. The things you do to grow jobs is you put lids on spending. You put lids on taxes, and then you fix the energy problem. You do that, and you will see a change.
Okay. Norm wants to continue the Bush economic policy. Understand that. That's what Norm Coleman wants to do. He wants to make it permanent. Yes, I want to rescind the tax cuts on the wealthiest Americans, because Norm believes that wealth starts from the top and trickles down. I believe that the middle class,
Al has said this many times. I just want to stop right there. Please, Al, don't tell me that I believe that wealth trickles down. I've been there, mayor of St. Paul, walking the streets, figuring out how to grow wealth and create jobs. And I figured out that you do it by keeping lids on taxes, keeping lids on spending. So please, you come in with a package, a plan for spending. It's about $1 trillion over 10 years. Long-term health care, student loans, universal health care for everybody. But please don't be articulating my vision of anything trickle down. I've been on the streets. I've been in the neighborhoods, and I know how to grow jobs.
We have seen over the last 8 years the result of the Bush economic policy, and Norm Coleman wants to make those policies permanent. I want to rescind the tax cuts on the very wealthiest and give tax cuts to the middle class. The middle class is the engine of our prosperity, and it always has been, and it always will be.
You know, I've been a middle-class guy since I was born in Annandale. I've never made it the upper middle class like some people on this stage are right now. But let me I've been watching this go on now for about 5-6 minutes. This is why I'm running. I mean, this is what's wrong. I mean, Al, you had your buddy from New York, maybe it could be your Senator Hillary, come in here and do some ads for you. Just can't wait to get 60 votes so you can stick it to the Republicans. So you can go there and be a nice partisan person in line. You know, you did it. I saw the ad. I've been watching it about 10 times an hour about, boy, isn't going to be nice when we get 60 so we don't even have to listen to those Republicans. That's what's wrong with Washington. Is you guys, what happens if you get 59? Nothing's going to happen. You're not going to talk to them. We need someone who's going to go there and start breaking down these divides, this partisan bickering, this gridlock that is just locking Washington. Why do you think it's at a 9% approval rating?
Well,
it's because of things like that.
You're an independent. Could you do that by yourself?
Well, I did it before. I was there before. I didn't caucus with anyone. I got a lot of things done in 8 days.
We're going to take a quick break.
We're going to take a break, and you'll have time to rejoinder coming up. We'll be back in just a minute with more give and take, but first a tune-in announcement from Mary LaHammer.
Well, welcome back. We have more debate to get to tonight. You wanted to, just before we took the break, we were going to be talking about the issue of bipartisanism, I guess, if that's the right word to use. And in the case of Mr. Barkley, maybe tripartisan. Esquire magazine kind of gets to this point. They endorsed Senator Coleman in their recent article, and they write, Coleman, a centrist, uncomfortable in a right-wing party, is exactly the kind of Republican Democrats can work with. Franken, the sort of knee-jerk partisan that both parties should avoid like disease. Anyway, we preferred his earlier funny work. So Esquire endorses Senator Coleman. So are you the type? Are you a centrist, uncomfortable in a right-wing party, and the type of Republican that Democrats can work with?
This issue is the fundamental issue of the campaign. That the partisan divide is what's tearing Washington apart. It's made it difficult to solve the problems that Americans face: health care for everybody, energy independence, figuring out a way to, keep the budget under control. The difference between myself and everybody here is that I have a record experience of working in that way. That's what I've done. And I've done it whether it's been working with Democrat Ken Conrad on disaster assistance, voting to override 2 presidential vetoes on a farm bill, whether I've worked with Senator Mark Pryor, working on rural renaissance. I could give you 50 of these things. So the difference is Mr. Franken, who's had a career of tearing the other side apart, Mr. Barkley, who would be on the side. If in the end you're going to really get things done, you're going to provide solutions, you got to be able to work with folks and get things done. I think that's my record.
Norm talks a lot about bipartisanship. He's running for 2 offices right now. He's running for the Senate, and he's also running for chairman of the NRSC. That's the National Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, the one that's running these vicious ads against me. The chairman of that committee is the most partisan member of Congress, of the Senate, and his counterpart on the other side. His job is to attack Democratic senators and Senate candidates. Now, this is the second time that Senator Coleman has run for this. Senator Coleman also supported President Bush 98% of the time in the first year, and then it now has come over toward the end to make it look like he's a moderate. But very often he votes when there's a safe vote, so he gets his
Could I address the characterization?
Yes,
I got to address the characterization. Again, objectionable to characterize my actions. My colleagues, some would like me to be in leadership if I get back, because I represent a part of the Republican Party that's unfortunately disappearing. There's one Republican congressman in the Northeast. We shouldn't be a party just to the South and West. So the bipartisan way we operate, some folks have said we'd like to see that. I will not take the job of being the head of the NRSC if I have to do it in the way that Chuck Schumer is doing it now and others have done it. Rudy Boschwitz was the chair, and still came out of it an honorable man. If the job requires the way politics are now, I don't want to be the head of the NRSC. So please, Al, don't again characterize my actions based on your perceptions.
Let's go down history here a little bit. There's no denying you were handpicked by Bush and Cheney. I mean, the phone call was made. You and Pelini switched. You ran for Senate. He ran for governor. So you were picked by them. You were in lockstep with the Bush administration by and large the first 3 to 4 years, and then you changed. As Bush became unpopular, you decided you're very good at it. You're a good politician. I mean, you endorsed Clinton, and then you endorsed Bush. I mean, you can be bipartisan. I just hope that Ralph Nader isn't leading in the polls.
By the way, again, I want to address. I want to address the mischaracterizations.
No, but then you did change, and you're trying to be just like me now, and I admire that. And you say that I haven't gotten anything done. Well, you had your minute. Then you can rip me after I'm done. Okay, just let me finish. You know, you're saying that I didn't get anything done. I was there for 8 days. I was a key player in the Homeland Security bill. Me and 5 other moderate Democrat Republican senators. I got Minnesota's TANF waiver. I got the authorization for the Wellstone Center in 8 days. Not bad. The Ventura administration, we did a number of things in a tripartisan way. So you're not the only one that can get there and be bipartisan, tripartisan. I think I've shown that I can do it too.
I just want to address the mischaracterizations. My record has been one of being the most independent senators when I first got in the office. You look at any Washington Post, look at whatever. I just want to address that. But Dean, you know, the fact is you were there during a short period of time, okay, in a very close divided, and so you voted for some things that passed. But that's not a record of working across the aisle, bringing people together and getting things done. And that's a huge difference between you and me and Al Franken in this race.
Talk about working in a bipartisan way.
Can you do it quickly?
Yeah, I think so.
Great.
I worked with a Republican Navy doctor, career Navy doctor, Dr. Bob Metters, and together, he was a right-wing Republican from Texas. When I was on the radio, because I'd gone to Iraq 4 times, I knew that they weren't getting the proper equipment. And I worked with him to raise money while I was on the radio, across party lines, get 40,000 helmet liners for our Marines. Now, I will work across party lines. I will love to work across party lines.
Will you work across party lines, Al, if somebody disagrees with you? It's not a matter. That's the point. It's not in Washington. You take your perspective, and somebody brings a different perspective. And so the way you get a farm bill through, the way you get an energy bill through, the way you get health care through, is that you got to be able to sit back and say, I may not be the smartest guy in the whole world, but I actually accept some of your ideas so that we can get it done for the American people. That's what we did on Medicare Part D, prescription drugs, which you voted against. That's what we did on the stabilization bill, which you said you'd vote against.
Okay.
I mean, I could go on and on.
Okay, let's go to another issue that I haven't heard you guys talk about, which is the Second Amendment. Your writings are replete with sort of negative comments about the National Rifle Association, about gun ownership. Where are you for folks that are concerned?
Actually.
No?
No. Can you cite one?
I've seen a list of some.
Mm-hmm.
Really? Can you cite one?
I'm not like all those. I'm not like all those folks in the NRA. Can somebody explain? This is quoting Al Franken, not me, by the way. I support the Second Amendment.
Phil Graham and his shotgun collection. We should just tax some of the
Baseball
shotguns.
cards.
I didn't say anything about taxing them. I didn't. I just said, look, I support the Second Amendment. I don't think we're any different on this. I support people's right to collect guns, to use guns for protection, to hunt. I don't think there's any difference whatsoever between us. I'm not a hunter. I think I grew up as an angler, but I did go hunting for the first time last fall with Colin Peterson, the chairman of the Ag Committee. My staff made up a briefing that said, shoot this, and it was a picture of a pheasant. Not this, and it was a picture of Colin. And it was mission accomplished.
That is a stunning statement to say that we are the same on the second. A stunning statement for somebody who said that, who's talked about supporting limitations on the number of guns in urban centers, who has written comments and said things. I'm not like those folks in the NRA. That is an absolute. Al, you've learned the political game pretty well in a short time. But there's no question, but there's a significant difference. I got an A, and I say it in urban areas and I say it in rural areas. I got an A rating from the NRA. I believe in the Second Amendment. Al got an F, and there's a huge difference. That is a stunning statement to come from you.
But knee-jerk gave me an F, listen, I support, I don't know how many times you can say it, I support the Second Amendment. People have a right to own guns for hunting, for collecting, for self-protection. I agreed with the Supreme Court decision on the handgun thing in Washington.
Heller versus D.C.
Yeah. And, I mean, there is this, again, there is a certain kind of trying to take things that I've written in the past and really distort them. And I just, I don't know how to put it any more plainly. What do you think that I want to do to take people's guns away? Do you think I really want to take people's guns away?
I mean, you said clearly that you like limitations on the number of guns that folks could own in home areas. You have talked, I believe, about taxation.
I think we were briefed by the same thing, because I read the same things, unless they were taken completely wrong.
I would love to know where you read
my briefing paper afterwards. But no, that's not it. But, you know, this is one of the few times in this debate you'll hear me say this. I think I agree with Norm on the Second Amendment. I agree absolutely with him. I think the Second Amendment is the guardian for all the others. And I'm glad the Supreme Court had the decision. It's more than just for our militia to armor. It's actually our right to have and own weapons. Okay. Obviously, if you're mentally ill or if you're a convicted felon, they should not get guns, but everyone else has the right to have them.
I do support background checks. The Brady, you know, that we should have background checks and we should have a data bank base, and that you should have background checks. But I've never said that you should limit the number of guns that someone should be able to own in an urban area. I never have written such a thing.
We'll put it on our website. Go to www.colemanforsenate.com. We'll lay it out there, and folks can take a look at it.
While we're on writings, because Eric brought this up, and I need to ask you about this. Early in the campaign, as you know, you were criticized for writings that even some DFL women were offended by. This week, a conservative newspaper columnist took you to task for mocking Jesus Christ and Christians, and on your radio show at one point, Catholics. And since Minnesota has a high percentage of churchgoers, what are they to make of your religious satire and some of your past writings?
Well, I've been married to a Roman Catholic for 33 years. My wife's family are here. My mother-in-law is here, and my sister-in-law is here. I've given away another sister-in-law in a Catholic church because her father died young. And I respect the Catholic Church. I've written jokes over 38 years, and I think we're kind of past this. Some of the jokes I've written haven't been funny. Some have offended people, and I've apologized. But I've been married to a Roman Catholic for 33 years. You know, my daughter wrote a piece today in the Star Tribune about this. And I respect the Catholic Church. That's all I have to say.
Weren't you offended, though? Weren't you offended when some bishops and others said they wouldn't serve communion to John Kerry? And wasn't your reaction that, and you know, satire has a point. You can make the point, folks can either agree or disagree. And wasn't that you know, part of the thought? I think one of the things you proposed that never ran on Saturday Live was priests serving communion to dogs and pedophiles. You were upset about that. You said that very, very clearly.
That's never ran,
that you were upset. Right? But I'm saying that's, in other words, he's right.
Listen, I left Saturday Night Live in 1995. John Kerry ran for president in 2004, Senator.
But this is an issue that you've raised before. In other words, this is a person. So the Kerry thing is a reflection. You've had this feeling, and you've articulated then in writings. And in the end, again, people can judge. The comment here is that the Senate is a serious place. And you're going to have to be taken seriously by your colleagues. And each of us bring we bring records or biography. Your biography are the writings. My record are my votes. And so either people can judge you on those, or what else do they judge you on?
I think this is a typical mischaracterization. John Kerry ran for president in 2004. Look, I wrote jokes for 38 years. Every joke is out there. Some of them weren't funny. Some of them offended people. I've apologized for that. The people of Minnesota expect that their senator will comport himself with civility and dignity. And they deserve that, and that's what they'll get when if I'm have the honor to be elected senator from Minnesota.
So, Dean Barkley, when you hear about this of course, the comments from the conservative columnist aside, what do you think about, is this
Well,
anything to worry about, or
Well, I
anything
think
that
it's up for
voters
the
should?
voters of Minnesota to decide whether what has done in the past, where the humor was, what they did. That's for them. I'm not going to sit there and pile on and say that I wouldn't or I would have. I mean, it's a public record, and people are smart, and it's been exposed. I worked for Kinky Friedman a few years ago, and he had some pretty bad things in his past that he did, and he paid a little bit of a price for it in Texas. So that's up for the voters to decide. So I don't want to belabor the point.
Should Osama bin Laden's capture be more of a strategic goal of the U.S.? Al Franken, have we done enough to get Osama bin Laden?
Well, this is one of the tragedies of the war in Iraq. It took our focus off the people who attacked us. And we are now, our mission in Afghanistan is in real trouble. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has said that. And this is why it was a terrible mistake to go into Iraq. And in addition to all the other reasons it was a horrible mistake, our standing in the world, enhancing Iran's position, we should be, according to the NIE, Al-Qaeda has reconstituted itself along the Pakistan border, and they are a threat to us. And I agree with Senator Obama. He said that if we have actionable intelligence that either Osama bin Laden or one of his lieutenants we know where they are in Pakistan, and the Pakistanis will not attack, or are either unable to or unwilling to, that we should. And he was criticized for that, but then later we started doing it. So I think, the really important thing is to go after Al-Qaeda.
Senator Barkley?
Well, I've said all along that we can debate why we got in. I think that's behind us. We had an obligation to fix Iraq. Al-Qaeda didn't show up in Iraq until we got there. I mean, they followed us there, but we're there. And my position has been, I believe that 5.5 years, over $600 billion, over 4,300 American lives is enough. We've given Iraq now a chance to stand on its own 2 feet. Eventually, they're going to have to do it. And I think it's time for us to seriously consider getting out of there within 6 months to a year. I mean, I'm not fixed on that, but we have to make a commitment now. We've done it, and then we have to go to Afghanistan. That's where they've been the whole time. Obviously, we have to send in more troops there. But the long-term solution for Afghanistan isn't more bombs. It's rebuilding that economy so organizations like Al-Qaeda cannot exist. That's the long-term solution to Afghanistan.
The areas where we agree on Iraq is we all agreed originally that we believed the intelligence and all supported the initial effort to go into Iraq. I think we all believe that we should be out quickly, as safely as possible. The difference, however, is, Mr. Barkley, you have advocated precipitous withdrawal. You've talked about it as a joke, but you've talked about Humvee can travel. So let's get out. That's naive. It ignores the implications of precipitous withdrawal. The Iraqi Study Group talked about that. Mr. Franken has talked about getting out, setting a time. We're going a while back when Harry Reid said the war was lost. If we would have followed that kind of advice, in fact, the war might have been lost, and we'd have a problem both in Iraq and Afghanistan. The reality is that the surge, but let me just say, getting the surge has provided, and now great success has driven Al-Qaeda into Afghanistan and areas of Pakistan. Now we have a template and a strategy to prevail. But had we followed the advice of either of these gentlemen, this situation would be worth. Getting Osama bin Laden should be something that we're doing 24/7 focused on. But there is the largest strategy of the war against Islamic extremism and how we deal with what's happening in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And Dean, I agree with you on this one issue. It's not just about the military action, but the surge wasn't just about the military action. So we have a template, but we had followed the advice of Dean or Al, we would have been in a worse situation than we're in today, and the prospect of having to go back, which nobody would want.
Should there be, by the way, permanent U.S. bases in Iraq?
That will be a decision from the Iraqis if they want us to be there. If it's along the lines of we're in Germany or Japan, and we think there's some strategic interest and they want us there and our folks are in the crosshairs, then that will be a decision that will be laid out, and us in Congress will have to take a look at it. I think the issue is, one, are we wanted there, and two, are our folks in the crossfire? But the bottom line is we've been in Germany, we've been in Korea, we've been in Japan for many, many years, and there are some strategic advantages to that.
Permanent U.S. bases in Iraq?
No, I think it sends the wrong message. Also, the Iraqis don't want us to have permanent bases there. I think what we have created in Iraq is a culture of dependency on us. For example, we're sending billions of dollars over there to do reconstruction, and they won't spend their own money on the reconstruction. A commander there asked the Minister of the Interior, why won't you spend your own money on your reconstruction? He said, why should we when you're doing it? You know, we're spending so much money over there, $400 million a day. We have to tell the Iraqis and the countries in the region that we're leaving. And that's the only thing. General Petraeus says there's no military solution to this, only a political and diplomatic solution. The only way to jumpstart diplomacy is let them know that we're leaving. And that would, look, Syria has over 1 million Iraqi refugees. It doesn't want Iraq to fall apart. Jordan has almost 1 million Iraqi refugees. It doesn't want Iraq to fall apart. Neither does Turkey. Neither does Saudi Arabia. Neither do, I believe, does Iran. So these countries will only jumpstart diplomacy if we say this is not an open-ended commitment and we're leaving.
Again has said things he just makes up. The Iraqis are paying for some of their reconstruction. I want to pay more. I want us not to be doing any, but now the Iraqis do pay for their reconstruction. They got a lot of oil. That's one of the reasons we got to step back.
They're paying very small
Well, you just said they're not. You just can't just say things because that's not reality.
I think this leads to a wider question of what is our role in this, for the United States. We're $11 trillion in debt now. We spend more money in our military budget than all the military budgets combined in the rest of the world. Can we afford this? We've had troops in Germany now for over 60 years, and they're not gone. We've had troops in Japan for 60 years, and they're not gone. We have 700 foreign military bases spread throughout the world. What are we fighting? Why do we need to spend this much money that we don't have? I'm willing to take on the debate of what is the proper role. Why do we have to be the world's policeman? Can we afford that? With China bankrolling us right now. I mean, that's what's happening in our country. We've got to get real. We've got a new reality here. And the military is one of the first places I would look, because it's the second largest budget item, to start trying to bring some sanity back to the way we spend money in this country.
U.S. role in the world.
Well, the U.S. role in the world, in the last 7 years, we had an opportunity after 9/11. After 9/11, the world was behind us. And we blew it. And we blew it by the president and Cheney and Rumsfeld and those people misleading us into Iraq. And we need to stop this cowboy foreign policy that we've had. And our role in the world we need to work with allies, we need to talk to our adversaries, and we need to have a new kind of foreign policy and lose the foreign policy that we've had during the Bush-Cheney administration.
Would you admit that there have been mistakes in foreign policy, this cowboy foreign policy?
Well, clearly mistakes, but let me just answer the question and respond to the U.S. role. The bottom line is that we have a stake in stability in areas of the world. So we've been one of the largest providers of food, AIDS relief in Africa, so we have an interest in that. We have an interest in stability in Europe and Asia. And if you see the economic collapse, it's been international. You understand that we just can't simply kind of isolate ourselves and pull ourselves back. So we are engaged. The question is, what's the proper role? Are we doing it in concert with others? We shouldn't be the world's policeman. There's no question about that. That's why we need a UN that is clean, that's transparent, accountable. I've spent time with that. And you're right about waste in the military or in the defense. I've spent a good part of my time in the Senate on shooting at waste and abuse in the defense. It's like shooting fish. It's like fish in a barrel. But the idea of simply stepping back and stepping out, which would provide for perhaps greater instability, we'd pay a terrible, terrible price. So let's have that debate. It's worth having. But the answer is not as simple, Dean, as you portrayed it.
No, I said let's have the debate. I didn't say what the conclusion's going to be. I said let's start talking about it.
Okay.
Al Franken?
Norm was chairman of the most powerful oversight committee in the Senate, chairman of the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. He did not one hearing into the contracting in Iraq. And he said, in a piece that he wrote in the St. Paul Pioneer Press, he said that he did it, and that he said the buck stopped with me.
Okay, so let's get
and now
quick
he's been
response.
passed, and now let's hear him pass the buck.
Very, very, very quickly, I'm very proud of the work that we've done. I say we and my Democratic counterpart. Identifying $80 billion waste, fraud, and abuse. And we, my Democratic counterpart, bipartisan, a concept Al may find hard to understand, we're part of a group that set up and voted to have a special investigator for Iraq reconstruction that does Iraq. And let me just say this. The fact is that the Democrats who run the subcommittee now have had zero investigations in Iraq. And the way the committee works, is that it is true, Al. And the way the committee works is that at any time they could have chosen to bring an investigation. But again, we work in a bipartisan way, and I'm proud of the work that we've done hand in hand with my Democrat counterpart.
6 hearings done by Senator Levin in the Armed Services Committee. The reason that the permanent subcommittee chairman is the only one who can unilaterally subpoena people, and you know that, and you didn't do your job, and you said
Al,
the buck stopped
again.
with me.
No, Al, you're misleading again. The fact is that the Democrat could have investigated any investigation. That's the rule. So, Al, you just can't say things that aren't true.
You can veto any investigation.
No, you cannot, Al.
Dean Barkley, you're at the door. You got 20 seconds to tell an undecided voter why vote for me. What would you tell him?
Well, you've just seen about 2 minutes. I rest my case.
Al Franken, 20 seconds. Close the deal here. Why should someone vote for you?
Because we need to send somebody to Washington who's going to work for change, who's going to work for middle-class families here in Minnesota instead of for the special interests, and is going to work with Senator Klobuchar and with President Obama to get the change that we need.
Thank you.
Because it's not just talking about change, it's actually working in a bipartisan way. Beyond, by the way, but with Democrats, Republicans working together, we can solve the energy crisis, we can provide universal health care, we can get the economy back on track. But it's working together, not just kind of looking at from the cheap seats and complaining or saying I'm only going to work with Democrats.
Gentlemen, thank you. We're done.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time. Appreciate this. Thank you for watching. And for more information about this race and to rewatch any of tonight's debate, you can go to our website, tpt.org/politics, and check your local and C-SPAN listings for rebroadcasts of this program. Remember, there's one final debate in this campaign. It will be Sunday, November the 2nd on Minnesota Public Radio News. Good night.